there, didn't I say so? Okay, I think you can admit everybody, Isaiah.
Cool.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Adina Friedman, and I'm the CEO of Young Judea Global, for those who don't know me. Welcome to our webinar today entitled, How Can We Work Towards Peace During War? And we will have the honor of being in conversation with 4 esteemed alumni who have been deeply committed to the work of coexistence and peace in Israel. Young Judea prides itself in being a big tent Zionist youth movement. What that means is that we aim to provide a safe community for Judeans to share their own perspectives and be exposed to a range of other perspectives within the larger Zionist tent. We do not align ourselves with one particular perspective and do our best to hold the tent open for all who can affirm Israel's right to exist. We try to share a range of perspectives and to show the range that exists within our Young Judea community. Our goal with our youth is to help them develop a personal and deep connection to Israel. For the past few weeks, we have been actively promoting information about how to support Israel through the March on DC, rallies in various states, volunteerism throughout the country and in Israel, and in a few weeks, an opportunity to travel with us and to volunteer in Israel. However, there is a contingency of Judeans who have been feeling increasingly disenfranchised by the movement they grew up with and loved dearly. As they say in their words, they do not see themselves in these efforts because they feel conflicted by what seems to be an unconditional support of Israel, which some interpret as unilateral support of the government and the military efforts, and an abandonment, perhaps, of efforts of peace and coexistence. While there are those who feel strongly that there is no other conversation to be had in the middle of a war and until the hostages are returned, there are others who have spent a lifetime committed to peace and coexistence in the region. And while they may feel shaken by this moment, their commitment is steadfast. In this season of Hanukkah, as we mark the military victory of the Maccabees, we also mark the spiritual victory that has sustained our people for all of these years. This webinar is an opportunity for us all to honestly ask the question, is it okay to talk about peace during wartime? And if so, what can that work look like now in the aftermath of October 7th? I would like to invite all our listeners to listen with open hearts and minds and to be open to the intellectual rigor of the critical questions that may emerge and a healthy and civil debate true to the spirit of Young Judea. We invite you to engage with our panelists through the chat, and we will incorporate your questions at the end. To moderate this panel, I would like to invite Linda Gradestein to join me. In addition to being an alum of Young Judea, Linda is an Israel correspondent for Voice of America and CBS Radio. She was Israel bureau chief for the Media Line news agency, the Israel correspondent for NPR News, and as a freelance reporter, she has reported for PRI's The World and AOL News and other venues such as Slate. Linda, thank you so much for joining us. I turn it to you now.
Thank you, and Chanukah Sameach, everybody. I'm very happy to be sharing this for us in Israel. It's the 6th night of Chanukah. I know that hasn't started for you guys in the States. And so I'm going to try to start as quickly as possible. I'm going to apologize in advance to the panelists because I'm going to shorten their bio so that we have more time. If I read the whole bio that everybody has done, we would spend the whole hour. So it really is my pleasure to join all of you, and then we'll get started with questions. So our first panelist is Gershon Baskin, who was also my Young Judea leader. And Gershon was an advisor to Israeli, Palestinian, and international prime ministers on the Middle East peace process, the founder and director of IBCRI, the Israeli-Palestinian Public Policy Institute, and the initiator and negotiator of the secret back channel between Israel and Hamas for the release of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. Next is David Lehrer. Dr. Lehrer holds a PhD from Ben Gurion University, and he was the executive director of the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies, and has now become director of international development, and he has been a member of Kibbutz Keturah since 1981. David, welcome. Next is Sharon Peress. Sharon is a coordinator and committee member of the Foreign Relations and Committee for Ties to Palestinians for Women Wage Peace. And Reuven Hanan Stone is a peace and coexistence activist and the resource development coordinator at the Rossing Center for Education and Dialogue in Jerusalem. So welcome to everybody. The format will be as follows. I will ask a question. I will call on you guys each. I'll switch up the order. I'll ask you to try to keep your answers to about 2 minutes so that we have time both for questions and also questions from the audience. And my CBS pieces are 35 seconds, including a soundbite. So 2 minutes is a lot of time. Okay, let's start. The first question is, how did the events of October 7th change the work that you do? Gershon, you want to go first?
Good evening, everyone. Chanukah Sameach. Thank you, Linda. I can't say anything in 2 minutes, so it's a real challenge. I've been involved in Israeli-Palestinian Jewish-Arab relations for 45 years, and this is certainly a disastrous time for all of us. The most important change for me in this work is reminding people every day that when this war is over, after we've experienced the biggest trauma since the Holocaust, and without comparison, the Palestinians are experiencing the Nakba all over again, there are going to remain 7 million Israeli Jews and 7 million Palestinian Arabs living between the river and the sea. And if I thought that in the last years there was no longer a viable two-state solution, all of a sudden it's back in front of us. So where I have been searching for alternative solutions to the two-state solution over the past years, we're back facing the two-state solution once again, only now we have to stop talking about it and we have to turn it into a reality. This is the challenge before us. If anything will come out of this war, it will be what I've been calling the Belfast moment. Not that in Belfast it was a moment, it was a process, but there came a time after hundreds of years of killing each other that the people in Northern Ireland stood up and said no more. And this is our challenge today and the day after tomorrow.
Reuven, thank you, Gershon.
I can't say it better than that. I agree with every word that Gershon said. I would say I'll just offer one small thing that the organization I work at is offering, and I know maybe there are others that do this too. But for the peace building field that regularly brings together Israelis and Palestinians, as well as Jewish and Arab Israelis, this time can be so difficult to even have conversations, especially for new participants, people that have not engaged in dialogue before. And so conversations happening, regulated conversations happening in uninational spheres, but still geared towards building a more tolerant future, are also still very valuable at this time. So that could be a shift that, emotions are so high that right now, temporarily, whether that's for a few months, a year, people might need to take a breather. But then, as Gershon says, at the end of the day, we're still absolutely going to need to come back together and figure out how to all live here.
Sharon, please.
Okay, hi everyone. Good evening. Chag Sameach from Tel Aviv. How did October 7th? So on a personal level, I think all Israelis needed maybe a few days to absorb what was going on and process it. Okay, it was quite a shock. As you know, I think all of us knew some people who were either killed or kidnapped or badly injured. So, and I right away, within a few days, I started reaching out to friends, both like Jewish friends in Israel. Are you okay? Are you okay? Is your son in the army? Is your husband in the army? Is your daughter in the army? But I also started reaching out very quickly to Israeli Arabs, because I realized that they probably felt kind of threatened by the whole situation, or fearful of how the Jewish population in Israel might react to them. There were Israeli Arabs who were like, let's say, women, absolutely afraid to go out of their homes, absolutely afraid. They were afraid of what might be done to them. So I started reaching out to them as well. I also reached out to some Palestinians I know, like in the West Bank. And as far as women wage peace, Nashim Osot Shalom, one thing that changed is that we got very involved right away with demands for freeing all the hostages. Our movement, women have been standing every single day, I think, except maybe Saturday. I personally have not been with them most of those days, but they stand at a certain place in Tel Aviv. It's called Kikar Chatufim, and they hold up the signs of the various hostages. So that's something that we've been doing, from the almost the very beginning of the war. Thank you.
Great. And David.
So I guess I could make this very short by simply saying what Gershon said. But that's probably because we read each other's blogs and we're starting to sound more and more like each other. I think the one thing that I would say that amazes me in this incredibly horrible period for all of us and for those who've been working for peace and reconciliation is what hasn't changed for me. And that is, on Sunday mornings, I teach a class at the Arava Institute, and every Sunday now, since the war began, I've been teaching the class, which has Israelis and Palestinians sitting in the classroom together, studying together on how to save the planet. So that's, one small kind of bright star in this very, very dark ocean. The things that have been most difficult for me have been the fact that for the past few years in my position at the Arava Institute, I've been devoted to cross-border work with Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. Some of my closest colleagues are in Gaza now. So obviously, when everything happened on October 7th, and like Sharon said, I knew people who were killed. I knew people who were kidnapped. And my daughter went to a number of funerals for people that were killed at the party, at the Nova party. It was just having your heart ripped out. But at the same time, I was in contact with my Palestinian colleagues who were terrified, who lost dozens of members of their family from bombings, who lost their homes, who lost their businesses, who now have had to flee south and are refugees. And trying to hold both those pains in one heart is incredibly difficult. And the one thing that I think has really changed for me completely is what Gershon said, which was that I also had my doubts about whether or not the two-state solution was going to be where we would be able to go next. It now seems to me that it is the only feasible solution. And I agree with Gershon that we all have to now step up our game and begin to work towards it.
Thank you. Before we proceed, I'd like to just remind the people in the audience that if anyone would like to ask a question, you're welcome to put it in the chat. And it would be helpful if you say which panelist you would like to ask. And in a little while, we'll move on to questions from the audience. The next question is, what motivates you to do the work that you do? And let's start with Sharon this time.
What motivates me? Wow. What motivates me are the problems here. First, I agreed completely with the things that Gershon said also in the previous question. Motivates me that, you could say tikkun olam. I mean, there's so many problems in Israel and so many problems in the world. I really give a lot of credit also to the Machon Arava work they're doing on behalf of the earth, but I don't know, what motivates me is that I want peace. And I think everybody should be trying to do something for that. So I think it's just who I am. Thank you.
Reuven.
What motivates me is also feeling a sense of obligation. Growing up in Young Judea and in a Jewish community in general, I feel a sense of not just belonging, but obligation to my people and my homeland. But thus far, the amazing dream of Zionism and of the Jewish people for 2,000 years to return to our homeland has only come about at the expense of another people. And I don't think that that is the ultimate fulfillment and realization of that dream. And so I think we need to continue until we can figure out how to achieve that dream, not at the expense of another people.
David.
Yeah, I really identify with what Reuven said. I'm a Zionist. I came to Israel because I believe that Israel is sort of the creation, is the baby, in a sense, the child of the Jewish people. And it's our responsibility, whether we choose to live in Israel or anywhere else in the world, but it's our responsibility to make sure that that child grows up to be something that we are proud of, that we believe stands for everything that Judaism teaches us. And therefore, to me, my dream is that we really become the light unto nations. That's what I believe Israel was meant to be, and I continue to work towards that goal.
And Gershon.
There are two things I think I learned in Young Judea. One is dugma yishit, being doing by example, and the other is living the values that we believe in. Since the age of 13, when I first came to Israel for my bar mitzvah, felt that this was my home. I made it my home when I was 22 years old, which was 45 years ago, and I live in peace. I live in peace with Israelis. I live in peace with Palestinians. I'm in love with the Hebrew language, and I'm in love with the Arabic language. I have lived with Palestinian Arabs and worked with them over the years. And my life is richer because I'm able to cross those borders and live in peace. And every day that I have contact with people who are sharing my values enriches me and motivates me to continue.
Thank you. I would just like to say an aside, Gershon, I don't even know if you remember this, but when you were my madrich, I remember that you did an activity on Der Yassin, and I had never heard of Der Yassin, and I was shocked. And I remember saying to you, there is no way that that happened. There's no way that Jews would do something like that. And you said, go and do your research. And it really had a big effect on me. So thank you for that. Yeah, Sharon, did you want to say something? No. Okay. The next question is, how or when is it okay to talk about coexistence and peace during a war? And I'd invite all of you to speak both personally as well as professionally. Let's start with Sharon.
Okay, so I think it's not only okay to speak about coexistence and peace during war, I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary to speak about it every single day, whether or not it's a wartime or not. But certainly now, with people being killed, a lot of people being killed on both sides. What's the how or when coexistence and peacetime? So it's all the time. And I think I try to speak with people who don't agree, who try to shut me up, and there's quite a few of them who say, we have to all be together now. We're fighting the Hamas, to hell with the Arabs, to hell with the Palestinians. All the Gazans are, animals. No, I don't believe that. And they will not shut me up. And so, yes, I think it's very important to keep going. Thank you.
And you and I both know Vivian Silver. who was
Yes,
killed,
true.
who was one of the founders of Women Wage Peace from Kibbutz Be'erian, who was killed.
Yeah.
Gershon, please.
First of all, it's always the right time to talk about peace and coexistence. There is never a wrong time. It's a challenge and it's difficult. I spent time with one of my Palestinian colleagues, one of my closest friends. Today, I was with him the other day for 3 hours. During the whole time, a Palestinian television channel was in the background in front of us, actually. And I listened to him and his pain as he was talking about all the people being killed in Gaza. And I had to resist not to respond. I felt that it was my place to express empathy for the pain that he was feeling, as I know he has expressed to me when we've talked about what happened on October 7th. It's difficult now, more difficult than ever. But it's more important now than ever to continue to talk about our belief that tomorrow can be better, that tomorrow will be a time where we will figure out how to live in peace in this land. It has to be.
Okay, good. Reuven, please.
I'm not sure I have much to add. I would say maybe the way I would phrase it is the inverse of what Gershon said, which is there's never a good time, but that still leads to it cancels out. And if there's ever a good time, so it's always the time, which is what everyone has said. And I think that you know, not all time is truly neutral or is truly the same. And so I certainly hope that unlike how the Israeli public and certainly the Israeli government has approached the issue for the past decades, I hope that when things are better and it is slightly easier, that's when things should move forward. But I'm not saying anyone should wait until then. I still do what I do every day, and I believe that we need to support this kind of work all the time.
And David.
When I'm talking to my Palestinian colleagues, and I'm talking to them almost on a daily basis, it really is, like Gershon said, all about empathy and all about holding yourself back to a certain extent. They expressed their horror on October 7th, but now they have pain and they want to be heard. They want that pain to be heard. And sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it's really not easy to sit there and just sort of take it. But I think that is really critical, that all of us here in this group are all part of this very, very fragile sort of network of cross-border, cross people's conversations, network of community that is fragile, and we need to hold on to it. We need to keep that small light burning, because there will be a day after, and at that time our role is going to be critical, because we're going to be the ones to help reconstruct what has been destroyed, not just physically, but also between human beings.
Okay, good. Again, there are a few questions coming in. If people want to put their questions in the chat, there are clearly many who feel that the war is the only way forward. Now, all four of you are involved in peace efforts. Has your opinion or approach changed during this time? And this time, let's start with David.
No, it hasn't changed at all. I believe that the way forward is through negotiations. I believe that the way forward is finding a way to put a ceasefire into place. I don't feel like, since the hostages, the hostage deal fell apart, that we are in a better position. I feel like we are in a difficult position, and I'm not sure that we're going to get any further through war. I always believe that the way to resolve conflict is through some type of negotiation, and I still believe that today.
Gershon.
Hi. I've been negotiating with Hamas for 17 years. The only reason why I negotiated with Hamas ever was to save human lives. And when I negotiated with Hamas over the 17 years to try and reach a long-term ceasefire, it was not out of choice, but out of the reality that it was our government, led by Netanyahu since 2009, who decided that Hamas should be in place. They were never my choice. But as long as they were in power, I thought that we needed to find a way to improve the lives of more than 2 million people in Gaza and to find some kind of long-term arrangement with Hamas. October 7th changed that. Hamas crossed the line between what separates humanity and what's on the other side of humanity. And I believe that Hamas lost its right to exist as an organization controlling the territory next to Israel. And I think that they have to be destroyed and dismantled physically and militarily and politically. But I also recognize that we can defeat them militarily and we can kill their leaders, and we should, but we can't defeat the idea through the military. You fight ideas with better ideas. And the better idea that we need to provide to the Palestinians is that rather than dying for Palestine, for Al-Quds and Al-Aqsa, they need to live for Palestine, Al-Quds and Al-Aqsa, which means that the possibility of living a life of dignity and freedom and a chance of prosperity, a chance of living in peace, is what needs to replace what Hamas has provided for them all these years. And that requires us and the United States and the international community to work very, very hard from now, not waiting for the day after the war, but from now putting the plan on the table that will give the Palestinians the understanding and the hope that they don't have to die for what is important for them, that they can actually live for it. So I'm clearer on that than ever before, and also clearer more than ever before that the people who run that movement called Hamas should no longer exist.
Reuven.
First of all, I just want to say that I'm going to answer more as myself and an activist and someone who lives here and cares about the work, and less in my professional setting. But I think my opinion hasn't changed, and what I want to, and I agree with pretty much almost everything Gershon said, but the thing I just want to add is the sense of democracy, and that activists, even Jewish Israeli activists, people who otherwise in the situation are considered, in the more privileged category, have been under threat, and there's war is also an opportunity to limit freedoms or take away democratic freedoms. And so baked into the question is this idea that, a lot of people think that the war is the only way forward. And I would say to anyone who says that the war is the right thing to do right now, it's important to still not silence people who, other dissenting voices, and to still have an open and honest conversation, just like in the United States during the Vietnam War. There's a large anti-war movement. This could be a moment similar to that, probably not on that scale, as many Israelis are indeed for the war. But I just want to be very, I'm hesitant from that democratic point of view.
And Sharon, please.
The question is, do I believe if war is the only way forward? Is that the question?
The question is whether your approach has changed, and do you believe that war is the only way forward?
Okay, so on a personal level, no, my approach has not changed. I've been extremely activist for a long time, and I'm continuing and will continue. The same I can say for women wage peace. nothing has changed. On the contrary, we've always been against war. One of the things that we say is one of the goals of our movement, and we are, by the way, the biggest peace movement in the country by far. One of the things we say is that we're here to prevent the next war. And always people have to talk. You know, you make peace with your enemies. You have to sit down in a room and just start talking. And as much as I hate that person, despise him, even if it's Yihya Sinwar or anyone else, I will talk if that might help, if it might help. So no, I continue, and my movement continues despite everything that has happened. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more of my questions and then I'll move to the chat. Do you feel that people who would in the past have been in left or center left have shifted in Israel? And do you think that's a permanent shift to the right, or is it temporary? Let's start with Gershon.
Yeah, I don't listen to wartime polls or wartime opinions. I think that we're responding to very difficult, traumatic situations, and they don't necessarily reflect what we will believe and feel tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. So everyone's very emotional today. There's not a night that goes by that I don't find myself crying in front of the television, and I watch both Palestinian stations and Israeli stations. I'm awake most nights thinking about the hostages, just imagining what they're going through. And I cannot respond rationally when my emotional level is so high. So I think we need to take people's shifting opinions with a very large grain of salt and understand that reality will be different tomorrow.
David.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Gershon that it's really difficult to have any kind of strong understanding of where people are at now when all of our emotions are so high and going from here to there. I don't think that what we're seeing now, if we see anything in the polls, is very meaningful in terms of where Israelis are at. But I do think that at the end of the day, we will end up in a different place than we were. I don't think that people have yet grasped the impact of trying to control 2 million people's lives in Gaza at the same time controlling 3 million people's lives in the West Bank, and holding our own on the northern border. I don't think that it's completely sunk in yet, but I do think that at the end of the day, people are starting to understand the heavy price that the country is paying for some people's messianic visions. And I think that could cause a shift which may allow us to move in a better direction after the war.
Reuven.
I'm usually the eternal optimist. In this case, I don't know, but it also doesn't really matter, because of course it matters. Of course, you need public will, and hopefully that in a democracy that can be then reflected in political will. But when I say it doesn't matter, what I mean is that everything still goes back to what we've been saying this whole time, which is there are 13 to 14 million people between the river and the sea, and the day after the war, there'll still be approximately the same number, minus thousands dead, but no one's going anywhere. And so, yeah, maybe a lot of people have shifted right. Maybe some of them will stay there. I don't know. And those people on the left, people on the right, religious, secular, Haredim, Dati Leumi, religious, modern Orthodox, everyone needs to figure out, how to move forward, because clearly the status quo is not a sustainable reality. So.
And Sharon.
Okay, so the question was, have people on the center left shifted to the right, and is that permanent? Okay, I also do not follow the polls or read them or look at them. There's too much else going on to even try to keep up with that stuff. However, my sense is that unfortunately, yes, I think a whole bunch of Israeli Jews have shifted right. I hope it's temporary. I'm not sure. But I also think that it's possible that the left has strengthened our resolve. My movement represents people on the entire political spectrum, but I personally would place myself in the left camp. And I think that our numbers have perhaps grown because, just like Reuven just said, or other people said, people have to start thinking about, what have we been doing wrong all these years, or what have we not been doing? And I think I think, yes, there are, I believe, I'm not sure, that there are more people have shifted to the right, but I also think the left has strengthened. And it's really very sad that we had to have a war for things to start moving. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move to some of the questions from the chat. There was an article in Haaretz a couple weeks ago by Dalia Shainline and the headline was "Not Two States, but One State, a New Way Out of Disaster for Israelis and Palestinians." And she says, I'm wondering what the panelists think of this idea. In other words, is there an alternative to either a two-state solution or a one-state solution? Gershon, you want to start?
Yeah, Dalia, who's I think Israel's #1 pollster and political strategist, is one of the founding members of the organization called Two States, One Homeland, which is also called A Land for All. And it reflects the vision of a two-state solution that I have supported from the very first day I lived in Israel, probably even before then. And it's not the two states with walls and fences that the Oslo process became, and one of the many reasons why it failed. But the two-state, one homeland vision that Dalia is a member of, and I didn't recall the article that she wrote, but I know that she strongly supports this idea, is a two-state solution built on bridges, built on cooperation, built on a kind of mini European Union where the goal is to arrive at permeable, penetrable borders between Israel and Palestine, where there can even be a differentiation between citizenship and residency, where Palestinians and Israelis could live in each other's state and hold citizenship in the state next door. And it's the vision that I've always believed in. The original Oslo vision, in fact, created 26 joint Israeli-Palestinian bodies that not one of them exists today, but it was originally based on this vision that the only way the two-state solution could exist and lead to peace is if we built cooperation rather than walls and fences. So that's my response to the part of the vision that Dalia is part of. Again, I don't remember what she wrote in that article.
David?
Yeah, I didn't read the article, so I don't know, but just what we believe at the RFI Institute is two states, one environment. Any two-state solution to be viable has to recognize the fact that our water resources are shared. Our electric grid there's only one electric grid, and to build a second electric grid would make no sense. All kinds of wastewater infrastructure, all kinds of roads and buildings and things that have, and our economy, it's all connected to each other. And the idea of trying to divide ourselves up into two completely separate entities with walls in between isn't the two-state solution, it's the two-state disaster. I think a two-state solution is some type of confederation, some type of union, some type of entity that provides Palestinians with self-determination and dignity and a feeling of some justice, but at the same time creates a community that can work together and prosper together.
Sharon?
Okay, I also have not read that article, but I am familiar with the Land for All movement. And I also feel that it's a very good idea. There's a lot of articles about it with, a lot of details. I don't think I think I agree with David so much that it's not, we cannot create in this very small geographical area two viable states with walls. Our histories are, you know, interwoven, and there's just not enough land. And I want to hope that there are small building blocks that can be done. I think the Land for All movement talks about, for example, having one police force for traffic problems, traffic violations. That could be one possible beginning. Also, medical clinics for cancer diagnosis. There could be one network of medical clinics instead of, you know, Israel having its health system and the future Palestinian state having its system, medical system. So I do think it's very good, and I hope that more people on this webinar will look into it.
And Reuven.
I've always focused my work on the sort of bigger picture and longer term and deeper sense of peace, meaning actual real peace between two people, not just a political agreement. I'm not saying that to dismiss, you know, any of the important creative political solutions that are out there on the table now, and like everyone said, those building blocks. But I'm also very aware that we live in such segregation, in a lot of cases by choice, and in some cases by military enforcement. But that separation leads to ignorance, and that ignorance can very easily lead to fear, and fear can easily lead to hate, and hate can lead to violence. And even having an agreement is not going to all of a sudden make everyone like friendly neighbors. And so that work is slow, and it should have started yesterday, and it should have started generations ago, and it has been generations ago, and many people have been working towards it, but it needs to be scaled. Instead of reaching tens of thousands of Israelis and Palestinians, it needs to reach hundreds of thousands, a significant portion of the population. It doesn't even need to be 50+%, but enough that somebody knows somebody, and people are in their networks, and people have exposure, and we can start chipping away at that ignorance. And that work is going to be ongoing before, during, and after whatever solution takes place. And that's what I focus on in my work and in my personal life.
Gershon, you spoke about your disillusion with Hamas, and you feel that they crossed a line. Do all of the panelists think that there is a valid partner to make peace with? If it's not Hamas, do you think it's the PA? Do you think it has to be the Palestinian Authority? Do you think it has to be somebody else? Start with Gershon.
Yeah, I think it's very important that the Palestinians select their leaders. In 2021, there were supposed to be Palestinian elections for the Palestinian parliament. There was a festival of democracy that was taking place in Palestine. Unlike Israel, where we already have the right to vote just by being in the population registry, the Palestinian Authority is like the United States. You have to do something active. You have to go and register to vote. And 86% of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza and in East Jerusalem went and registered to vote. And 36 political parties registered to participate in those elections. That's way too many. But there was a festival of democracy that was taking place, and those elections were canceled because Israel, the United States, and Mahmoud Abbas didn't want them to take place. And they created a convenient excuse of Jerusalem when the Palestinians should have never even asked permission from Israel for Jerusalem. Israel never even bothered to answer. They didn't say yes, they didn't say no, they just didn't bother to answer. And they canceled those elections. The Palestinian Authority is corrupt. Mahmoud Abbas is in his 18th year of a 4-year term. He's 86 or 87 years old. I know him personally. I've spent many hours with him. I like him as a person, but he no longer represents the Palestinian people, and they need to choose who represents them. I think that Palestinian elections need to take place as soon as possible after this war is over, after a stabilization period takes place. I think it is possible to fence in the Palestinian elections with international pressure so that parties that support the armed struggle cannot participate in those elections. Democracies need to protect themselves. If there's one thing that Palestinians agree on, and probably the only thing that Palestinians agree on, is that they want a new chance to select their leaders. And I think there's a whole new generation of Palestinians who want to rise to the position of leadership. They're tired of the people who have been leading them for too long.
Sharon.
Is there a partner with whom one can make peace? First of all, I believe there is. I'm not sure exactly who it is. It's not Mahmoud Abbas. He's too old. He also has lost a lot of support in the West Bank among his people, various reasons. And he's also been serving, as Gershon said, for 18 years. So it's not him. And there's a lot of cooperation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, but I agree so much that it's the Palestinians themselves must choose their own leaders, and the peace must be between Israel and the future Palestinian state or entity, and not imposed by the United States or the United Nations or Germany or any of the countries. The two people that in the conflict must find a way forward together. And I do believe there are people with whom to speak, because I'm also personally in touch with, even today, what's today, December 12th, I'm still in touch with some Gazans. I think David's in touch with some Gazans. Perhaps you are, Reuven, certainly Gershon is. We're still talking. So there are people there who, didn't support the Hamas and so forth. And I'm sure there are partners for peace. Thank you.
Reuven.
Oh, can I add
Oh,
one
yes,
thing?
please. Yes.
I'm sorry. Women Wage Peace helped a Palestinian women's movement arise about 2 years ago. It's called Women of the Sun. It's sort of like our sister movement in the West Bank. They're not exactly the same as we are, but we are working very closely together, and it's quite a new organization there, or movement, Women of the Sun. If anybody wants to read about them, they can go into our website. Sorry, thank you.
Not at all. Reuven.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, David.
Yeah, Women of the Sun, an organization that I'm also familiar with, the Aravai Institute has been working very closely with former members of the Palestinian Authority from the Salam Fayyad tenure. And we've tried to really help to support those people in Gaza and in the West Bank who want to cooperate, who want to work together with Israelis, who recognize that that's the future for Palestine. I think there are plenty of people that could be a partner for peace. We just have to reach out our hand.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to kind of put a few questions together. How was Netanyahu duped into thinking that Hamas was an organization to put in power in Gaza? Would Israel have been in power? Would Hamas have been in power if Israel did not back them? And what do you see happening, with Netanyahu once the fighting ends? David, let's start with you.
No, I feel like this is a question for Gershon. Come on.
Okay, Gershon, go ahead.
Mr. Hamas expert, not me.
Hamas won democratic elections in 2006, following the Israeli disengagement from Gaza, when Ariel Sharon refused to negotiate or coordinate the removing of Israeli settlements and the Israeli army from the Gaza Strip. It was very clear when he did that Hamas would win those elections, because they won the narrative of who got rid of Israel. It was very clear. If Ariel Sharon called Mahmoud Abbas a chick without feathers, and he's not a partner, and denied the ability to empower the moderates. Mahmoud Abbas was elected a year before on a ticket against the militarization of the Second Intifada. He had left Arafat because Arafat had militarized the Second Intifada, and Mahmoud Abbas departed from him and ran on a ticket for president under security coordination with Israel and against violence, against terrorism. And then Ariel Sharon diminished him to being a non-partner. Even James Wolfenson, who was the president of the World Bank, appointed by George W. Bush to run the coordination efforts of the disengagement from Gaza, left here disillusioned, understanding that Israel wasn't willing to cooperate with the Palestinian Authority in taking control of Gaza. Hamas was not created by Netanyahu, but when Netanyahu came back to power in 2009, he decided since he did not want to advance negotiations and a two-state solution, that he would delegitimize Mahmoud Abbas continually, as Sharon had done, by not negotiating anything with him, and he would keep a weakened Hamas in power in Gaza. So it would be easy to say to the Israeli people in the world, we want peace, but we have no one to negotiate with. And that has been the position of Netanyahu until today, till this very day, when he refuses to recognize that there needs to be a Palestinian state next to Israel. So the decision to keep Hamas in power was Netanyahu's decision. He financed it through the Qataris and through others. He enabled it to stay in power. Every time we went to war with Hamas, we declared that we would remove them from power, and they never did. Hamas always dictated the rules of the game, just as they are doing now in negotiations on the hostages. Israel is a passive player because there was an interest in keeping Hamas in power. That changed on October 7th, and we're paying the consequences of that today. And here's the important lesson learned from this for all of us, I hope, in that we wake up from this disaster that we've been living and recognize that you can't occupy another people for 56 years and believe that you're going to have peace, or lock up 2 million people into a territory with Gaza, like Gaza, with 80% poverty and 60% unemployment, and expect there to be quiet. This is not the reality that we can continue to keep living, and Netanyahu's fate will be decided by that failures. He will be out. This is the end of the Netanyahu era. And the big question today amongst Israelis is, should it be done now, or should we wait to the end of the war? And the number of people who say now is growing in Israel.
Sharon?
Yeah, I agree 100% with Gershon's analysis, and he has all the facts. I want to add, though, that because of the way that the various Netanyahu governments have not dealt with the conflict and just allowed it to continue and get worse and fester, and every couple of years there will be a war, a couple thousand people will be killed, sometimes more, but it's led the Israeli public to ignore the whole situation. And that's another tragedy. It's been very convenient for the Jewish Israeli public to ignore the entire situation, focus on their jobs, which country they're going to visit this summer, what they're making for dinner tonight. That's what they think about. They don't get, and I'm hoping that the October 7th atrocities and shock has made some Israelis realize that you cannot ignore. I'm not just talking about our political leaders, but the average Jewish Israeli has to start thinking about what you haven't been doing for the past 56 years. It's been extremely convenient for them just to ignore them completely, and they're there.
I think we have time for maybe two more. This is an interesting question. As you all seem well versed in coexistence strategies, can you suggest any ideas on how to support our kids entering college who will come up against anti-Israel and anti-Jewish rhetoric? While it's a nice idea to exist with others who are not Jewish, the likelihood that our kids will be accepted by those who do not like them because of our religion is an issue that my young Judean son will come up against really soon when he returns at the end of year course and enters college. David, you want to take this one?
Yeah, just want to recommend that everybody should watch the video of my daughter at Columbia University speaking to the pro-Hamas protesters. I think that what she did was incredibly brave. She stood up to them. She called them out. She exposed their own hypocrisy. But at the same time, I think she was also able to speak compassionately about the pain of the Palestinians. And I think that that's critical, that you can't that what we suffer from is the fact that we don't feel the empathy for our pain, but at the same time we need to be able to give empathy to those innocent Palestinians, understand that they are also suffering from this situation that we are all in.
Anybody else want to add to that? Yeah, Sharon, please.
Okay. I've thought a lot about how difficult it must be for college students in the USA now. They're 18 years old or 19 years old, and I know the situation is absolutely disastrous on a lot of American campuses and maybe in other countries as well. And I have thought about this. I think one of the people in the waiting, here participating is my cousin Joe Keller from North Carolina. I know he has two sons. who have perhaps by now finished college, but I used to think about them. How are they dealing with, you know, the anti-Israel backlash? So strategies, the only thing I can think of is to tell your children or to read. There's a lot of good books out there in English to learn this, to learn the facts, like Gershon knows them. I think the five of us know a lot of facts, and to just keep, and there's particular books that if a person really cares to understand that whole Middle East mess, and it's extremely complex, they should read. They should read and be armed with the facts so that they can perhaps defend Israel or defend Judaism or whatever. Thank you.
Gershon.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult right now because we're in the war, but even in American campuses, there will be a day after the war. I've always thought it was insane to import the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to campuses in the United States. It's totally crazy. And when I speak to pro-Israelis or pro-Palestinians on American campuses, I ask them, what are you doing that's constructive to help the people that you support? If you do support Israel or if you do support Palestine, what are you doing that's constructive, that's actually going to help the side that you care about? And in most cases, what I propose people to do is find like-minded people with them from the other camp and to do something together, to find a way of talking together, to find a way of arranging a seminar or a debate or something which is constructive and not simply aimed at bashing the other side. That doesn't help Israel and it doesn't help Palestine. So I really challenge people to find something that would actually help the side that you support.
A friend of mine's son, by the way, set up a table at Yale. He's a sophomore, I think, at Yale, and with a big sign saying, "Let's talk about Israel." And he had a table and chairs and people sat down. The last question, and again, for anybody
Wait,
who...
sorry, can I?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Reuven, I apologize.
okay.
Yes, please.
I just,
Please.
I've been in the setting a little more recently, and I'm sure it's gotten worse. I was on your course 10 years ago, and then I went to NYU after that, and like, I'm sure it's so much worse now in the post-truth era where everything is fake news, and it's even harder now, and with TikTok and all that. But I would say that what I wish someone had told me before was, instead of, I touched before on the things that I think Young Judea did really well and inspired me and got me to this point. I think that Young Judea and a lot of other Jewish institutions that I grew up in were very scared about this point, and tried to teach me a very specific brand of hasbara, of liberal, Israel is the liberal, oasis and the only democracy in the Middle East. Sorry, there's an echo. Someone's microphone is okay. So, sorry, could somebody mute or something? Okay. The entry point for me was interfaith dialogue. I got involved in Jewish-Muslim dialogue on campus. And at the time, the dialogue, I don't know what they do now, but at the time, there was no talking about Israel. But it was very important and formative for me, because I knew that all of the Muslim students who were involved in the Jewish-Muslim dialogue group were also showing up to all the pro-Palestine rallies. And I was extremely hurt by that as someone who was taught that anyone who shows up to a pro-Palestinian rally is inherently automatically anti-Semitic. Like, how could these people, I know these people aren't anti-Semitic because I go to other dialogue meetings with them. And I know that these are not just, they're not just okay people. These are some of the nicest people in the religious Muslim student community that's doing the most chesed and doing so many amazing things on campus. How could they also go to a pro-Palestine rally? That means they hate Israel. That means they hate Jews. Like, this is just not computing. And so I think that the person in the chat asked, what from the peace building world, what can we offer? I think, like Gershon said, first of all, separate and understand that the conversation there is not the same conversation that's happening here. It's talking about abstract ideas, it's talking about sides, but that even if you are going to do that, first of all, try to be grounded and actually talk about what is happening in Israel and Palestine. And if you can't, or in parallel, to also learn dialogue skills and to actually listen and empathize, and not to create litmus tests for who I talk to and who I don't talk to. But if someone is willing to sit down in the room and listen to you, you should be willing to listen to them. If they're willing to listen to what you have to say, that should be the only test, no violence and all of that. And then once they're willing to listen, you should listen too. And from there, you can begin to actually understand each other. But I don't think that a certain brand of Hasbara that is always trying to make excuses for Israel, or say like, well, it's really just so complicated, or even hold up some peace building organizations as examples of how and why Israel is good. I know it's combating the falsehoods that people think Israel is actually has complete like racial segregation, or like, I know there's a lot of misinformation, but I think the approach should absolutely be like, yes, there are bad things, and there are people in civil society working against those things and working towards equality, but also should be an approach of trying to understand where is that person coming from, because they think that they're doing the right thing, and they think that they're on the right side of history. And so people need to use more critical thinking skills and understand that no one narrative is that clear. And I know I've been speaking a lot. I just want to say that facts are good, but facts will only get you so far, because people just put facts, align up the facts to meet their own narrative. And so I think, I'm not saying don't read up and don't learn your facts, but also really familiarize yourself with nonviolent communication and with dialogue skills.
Okay, and the last question briefly, how can American Jews support the efforts of peace activists and bridge builders in Israel, and are there specific websites or resources that they can turn to? Who wants to go first? And with this will be the last question. Go ahead, Sharon. You're muted, Sharon, you're muted.
Of course, one way that American Jews can support peace efforts here in Israel, as usual, is financial contributions, donations. That's always welcome and needed. All these demonstrations that we hold are not, they cost a lot of money, big sound systems and stages and so forth. As far as websites, there's so many. I mean, Machon Arava is fantastic. Women Wage Peace, we have a website that, it's also in English. There's an awful lot of, you could go to Peace Now, you could go to, there's an organization called Combatants for Peace. There are many good peace organizations. They all need money and they all need support. Another thing that American Jews could do, perhaps, and I'm on the foreign relations team of Women Wage Peace, is perhaps set up, we're trying to establish a support group in the United States. We have support groups now in Brazil, in Italy, Spain, Germany, and some other countries, Argentina, and we're sort of trying to develop one in the USA. So stay in touch with Women Wage Peace, and we'll be happy to get you into our support group. Thank you.
Yeah, I suggest everyone go to the website of ALMEP, the Alliance for Middle East Peace. It's allmep.org. ALMEP is an umbrella organization. I think there are more than 100 member organizations of ALMEP. They have links to all the member organizations there. You can find an organization that you like and support and write to and join. And there are lots of ways of supporting, not just with money. There's a lot of expertise that can be shared. There's a lot of organizations when you come and visit Israel to link up with these organizations. But that's probably the best place to go and find organizations that work in every field of peace building and peace making between Israelis and Palestinians and Jews and Arabs.
David and Reuven,
once again, Gershon stole my line.
Your thunder.
My thunder, but I'll add to that one of the amazing things that ALMEP has done in the past few years has been to lobby for a major grant program from the U.S. government, the Middle East Peace Partnership for Peace Act, and it would also be very helpful for you to write to your congresswomen and congressmen and senators and say how much you support that program, because it provides millions of dollars for organizations like the Arava Institute, Women's Wage Peace, and many of the other organizations that ALMEP works with. So that's another way, is to show your congresspeople that you want to see more money going towards peace and to support people-to-people projects in the region.
Reuven, last words?
I just sent in the chat the link to the website of the Rossing Center for Education and Dialogue. There's a lot of resources there, and I also put my personal email address. Anyone can feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to point you to a variety of other sources about your more specific interests within the field.
Okay, before I give Adina the last word, I just want to say thank all of the panelists for their time this evening. I think we, touched on a lot of really important issues, and obviously this is just the beginning of the conversation and not the end. And thank you all very much. Adina.
Linda, thank you so much for moderating. Gershon, Sharon, Reuven, David, thank you for being with us here today, for sharing your really thoughtful perspectives and the work that you're committed to each and every day. I really feel privileged to have a community that can engage in this type of learning and critical leadership. Each of you has dedicated yourselves to this work, working very much against the tide, it feels. Thank you for giving us a glimpse into what you're doing and how this moment in our history is shaping that very work. As a number of you noted, this is a moment that is highly emotional and personal for everyone, and we can all get stuck within the repeated narratives of our echo chambers. I hope that Young Judea can continue to be that big tent, creating a safe space for learning and critical inquiry. One of you noted in the chat, how do we stop invalidating each other and actually listen between communities? And that really is our charge for today. I invite you to continue to listen, to be curious, to challenge your personal status quo in this moment. And for those who are interested in joining us for action, in addition to the learning, we invite you to join us in Israel to volunteer in January, February. I'll post the link in a moment on the chat for an interest form. We'll be sending registration out shortly. There's quite a bit of interest, and it's going to be a first come, first serve kind of thing. Thank you all for your time, for participating, listening. Chanukah Sameach, and may we seek to be the light that brightens us all in these dark days. Toda rabah.
Thank
Thank
you.